Welcome, America's Card Room members. My name is Dusty Schmidt. I go by the handle LeatherAss9, and I'm the playing ambassador for America's Card Room. Today I'm making another video of 4 tables. I have one full ring video on the top left. We'll call it Table 1. Table 2 will be just to its right, and then 3 on the bottom left and 4 on the bottom right. I have limits from 25, 50 cent to 1-2 today. And we're going to start off here on the bottom right table, table 4, with a call. On the top, on number 1, I don't really have the odds to call, I believe, with this ace-7 suited. I don't think that's going to be profitable. I think we can go ahead and make a play here on table 1 and go ahead and lead, which I know is sounds a little unorthodox, but you know, it is hard for them to hit this board. A lot of times they're going to be on 2 overcards, and I can certainly represent a hand like, you know, a flop set or, you know, a flush draw, where maybe if a diamond comes on the turn, I can go ahead and represent it. But this is a pretty good card here, and I'm going to go ahead and bet the turn. And I'll make it pretty big, trying to get him off his hand, and also build a pot sometimes for the times that I hit. Now, if he raises, that's going to be terrible, and I'm just going to have to fold, which will be really bad. But I don't expect to get raised too often because he's only really going to raise a set there. He can't really have king 8. I don't believe in his, you know, having called a raise from early position. So I think he's going to have something like 7s or 9s there quite a bit. And it's going to be really hard for him to call 3 bullets there with a hand like 9s. So I think I'd probably just fire out the river no matter what comes, but I would especially be excited, obviously, if it was a club. I would probably, you know, I would even bet a queen or a jack on the river, just trying to get him to, again, call down with a hand like 9s or 10s. And then a diamond, I think oftentimes he would raise me on the flop with a diamond draw, or he wouldn't just call twice with a diamond draw too often, although he might. But either way, I think if I shove all in on the river on a diamond, he's only going to call if he basically has a flush himself. I don't think he's really ever going to have a set and call twice on the flop and turn. So as you can see, it's kind of like no matter what comes, he's going to be in a difficult spot. It doesn't mean he'll always fold, as I'm hoping he will, but he just is going to have a hard time having a hand that wants to just snap call the river. And so I like my play. And, you know, if I get raised on the flop and I just have to fold, then that's perfectly fine because, you know, at the end of the day, I put $14 in on the flop to try and win, you know, about an $18 pot. And so I would expect me leading out into 2 people, I would get a fold, you know, about half the time. So it probably should be worthwhile to go ahead and lead out there. The last hand there on table 3, I folded ace-7 of clubs. You know, if we had a little bit of a bigger stack, you know, if we both had like 150 at the 50 cent a dollar table, then I might have argued more for a call or even a re-raise from time to time against my opponent. But I think it's probably going to be best to just go ahead and fold there. You know, when he raises from earlier position, he's probably more likely to have, you know, a good ace, like an ace that beats mine, like an ace-10 or ace-jack, ace-queen, ace-king. And he'll probably have some hands like myself that will raise there, or hands like I had that will raise there too. But, you know, for the most part, when I flop the ace, I'm not necessarily going to be super excited about it. It's definitely a no limit hold'em where your stack is threatened all the time. It's nice to have hands that you can feel a little more confident in on the flop. You know, flop is ace high. You'd much rather have ace queen and know that, you know, unless he flops some big monster, that only ace king is beating you. as opposed to, flopping an ace with a 7 kicker and knowing that, all kinds of aces beat you. Here with the ace jack, I don't know enough about his game. Sometimes I'll 3-bet there and call a shove against some players, but I don't think that's going to be a good idea here. I'll go ahead and call with the king jack off. Sometimes I will re-raise it. And here with the ace jack, I think we start off with a call as the most reasonable option. And here with the king jack, there's not a whole lot of reason to bet. We only kind of have one overcard, so to speak, to my jack, and that's the queen, because the king gives me 2 pair. So, I'm not going to put money in right now. And I will just go ahead and bet my jack here on the top right. So he checks back, or he checks into me on the flop, and then bets the turn. This is a little curious. I think I'm going to go ahead and call, and we'll see what comes and see what develops on the river. So he bets again, and this is kind of strange. I think at this point he might have just had something like an ace-10 or something that checked the turn or the flop, and I think at this point he just has me beat too often. I don't really see him trying to bluff that river into me with a worse hand. And he could even have a hand like queens or kings that just got scared of the ace and then figured I didn't have the ace and now is betting into me trying to get paid off. I don't really like trying to raise on the river and turning my hand into a bluff or something like that. I think he can have some big hands there that decided to slow play the flop. And the 8's on the top left is an easy bet. You're going to have the best hand almost always there. You would assume he probably would re-raise, a hand like 10s or jacks, queens, kings, aces, maybe not 9s. He's unlikely to have called a raise with a 5 in his hand. So we're just kind of going to have the best hand there almost always. He just kind of makes a small 3-bet with the king-queen. I think that's an easy call, getting 2.5 to 1. I don't really know much about this opponent or what his re-raises mean, but we'll just kind of play the odds at this point. And I have position in 2.5 to 1. That's going to be an easy call. I don't really think I need to re-raise. I don't mind peeling one off here because my king and queen are going to be good quite a lot. And, a lot of cards like 6 or 9 and stuff like that might just have him check and fold even if he has an overpair. And then a hand like ace-queen or something will often just kind of give up once called on the turn. So I'm going to go ahead and bet 7 into 11 here, and hopefully just try and take down the pot. It's one of those flops where, he made his re-raise real small, and the board sort of connects with the type of hands that I would be calling a re-raise with, and doesn't connect very well with the type of hands he would re-raise with before the flop. He's either going to have an overpair, which, is he can have, but it's a little more likely he's going to have 2 overcards. And he's just going to have a hard time wanting to continue to bluff me there when it looks like, I can have, a good top pair type of hand. Kind of a strange bet here on the flop. Unless he flopped a set, he shouldn't be too excited if I keep calling or if I raise him at some point. So I'm going to start by calling. We'll see if we can make a queen or a jack. And if he bets again on the turn, I I think I'm going to try and raise him and just put him in a tough spot with a hand like sevens or, even like 8-9 or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and make it about 1250 here, and I might also bet the river if called. I care more about what his actions look like than what my cards are sometimes, and it just looks to me like, he has a hand that is gonna, yeah, exactly, have a hard time, like a pair, but one that's just gonna not be too happy about getting raised on the turn there, and is gonna make some folds pretty often. So, and I don't run that play against my opponents every time they lead into me like that, because it's going to start to become a little obvious that I can't have, a really strong hand every single time there. But, if you spot those situations where, he's probably going to re-raise with a big pair before the flop. And when he leads out, it just kind of looks like a hand like pocket sevens that just doesn't know what to do and doesn't want to check call the flop and then, see it overcard come on the turn and watch me bet and not know what to do. So it just kind of leads out and hopes for the best. And I just think it's a good spot to take your opponent off your hand. The fours here, this is a spot where you probably have the best hand, half the time or something, but there's just nothing to get excited about unless a four comes. And if he keeps betting, which he's going to do with a lot of his overcards on the flop, and even like gut shot draws like Jack 9, stuff like that, that I just don't really feel like I can just keep calling down there in that spot. And so the pot's really small, and I just can't really make too much of a mistake by just folding right away. And I can make a much larger mistake trying to, put him on two overcards the whole time and make the hero call down. And not to say that I won't against some opponents who are very bluff happy, but for the most part, I think you can avoid a bunch of tough decisions and avoid making a big mistake. I mean, I don't mind the tough decisions, but I do mind making the big mistake, and I eliminate any chance of the big mistake by folding. We're going to go ahead and bet the King 9 offsuit. Kind of a tough board for him to connect with. It's going to have two overcards a lot and just fold. And the beautiful thing is, if he does have a hand like pocket sixes, I have two chances to hit a king or a 9. If an ace comes and he checks and I bet, he's just going to have a really hard time calling down. Or even if it just goes like, queen jack or something like that on the turn and river, it's just going to be real hard for him to call down with a hand like pocket sixes there. So I don't even mind if he calls, even though I know I'm beat at that point, because I just still feel like I'm going to outplay him. If I just keep betting, he's probably just going to eventually fold. So the action, is a little slow at the moment, and that's what kind of can happen at live play. I hate kind of having the gaps of silence in videos, but sometimes it's just the way it goes. But I am going to try and play more on the aggressive side and get in more pots. So, for example, I'm going to go ahead and make it 9 here and re-raise my opponent with the king 7 suited, which is fine to do sometimes. it wouldn't be my normal play, but I certainly always kind of give myself the option of making that play. But for the purposes of the video, I'm trying to get into as many spots as I can so we can have more to talk about. I'm going to just basically take every opportunity I have to play a pot for this video. Here at the ace-king, I'm going to go ahead and flat. If I re-raise and then go to get the money in, I do believe that he is going to just have a better hand than me typically. He's going to have kings and aces and queens that I'm going to run into for the most part, and sometimes the other ace-king. Here I have two overcards, a flush draw, on a board that's hard for him to make a really strong hand, so I'm going to go ahead and start by betting, and we'll figure it out the rest of the way. So, and that's always a nice turn. I think I can just bet here. Bet the turn, and if I get a safe river, bet again. So it looks like he was probably making some kind of either re-raise with ace-queen or just kind of a bluff. I guess it's also possible he had a hand like queens and then just decided that, maybe like two red queens or something that didn't have a flush draw, and just kind of decided that I'd probably have ace-king a lot or even king-queen, and just he could have just folded. So I guess it's the hands he could have are wider than just ace-queen. And actually, I think if he had a bluff, that'd be a pretty good board for him to continue to kind of rep a hand like ace-king. And so he's probably more likely to just have had a hand like jacks or queens specifically and just decided to play it really tight. Ace-10 here, this is a hard board for our opponents to make a really strong hand. I have an ace, so I guess it makes it a little less likely to have a hand as strong as ace-jack. I'm sure they would have re-raised with queens and kings and aces. So, it's not to say I'm going to always get him to fold ace-jack or king-jack. Probably not, actually. And if I got called there, I probably need to either commit to just betting all three streets and just trying to look really strong and hope he tosses away a jack, or I just need to make one bet and shut down unless I improve myself. But I do have the benefit of kind of have raised a little bit in earliest position and bet into two people on the flop. So a case could maybe be made for people who are capable of folding when they can only beat a bluff. That I can maybe get a hand like king-jack to make a big lay down. Queen-4 suited, a little loose, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. And against some opponents, I just don't know them well enough. It can be certainly reasonable to raise this flop, top pair, top kicker, and just be willing to get all the money in. I don't know enough about this opponent. He might only get the money in with overpairs, and so that would be a big mistake, and I'm going to take a little more of a passive line. And I'm going to bet the turn here. And the queen-4 suited, this type of flop, he's going to have hands quite a lot, and I might just kind of slow it down here. So this is really odd here with the min check raise. I should be pretty strong in his eyes. I called this flop and the flush came in and I bet. The price is so good. That's the problem. I'm 18 into 83, but then at the same time, he's not really ever expecting me to fold to this, so it just kind of looks like he just probably has a monster. I'm going to go ahead and actually make a fold here. I can't make that. I can't be letting somebody make just a tiny raise and me fold in a big pot as my default play, or I would just get owned. But at the same time, I kind of explain the logic there, and I don't have experience with this opponent. I don't think he's just like gonna take a hand like King 10 of spades that has kind of a hopeless type hand and make that play. I also don't see him just check raising like a King Jack or Queen Jack there. I think King Jack or Queen Jack's going to start to get kind of scared with that flush coming in and just sort of check and call and maybe even check and fold on the river. So he made a play where he just really shouldn't expect me to fold, which means it should just be a hand that he wants paid off on. And pretty much all the hands he should want paid off on beat me there, even though I had such a strong hand. So with that in mind, I would make that play again, certainly. I think I made the right play, although it feels very dirty. And certainly, like I said, if that was my sort of, if people were just going to do that to me and then I would just fold, then I would be the easiest person in the world to make money against, because basically if I don't have the nuts, I'm folding to a small bet in a big pot, which obviously is not a good strategy. But, sort of as an isolated play, I think I made the right decision. And he bets this flop really small, and it kind of looks to me like, I don't know, a hand like 9s or 10s. And I do have a flush draw, and I'm going to go ahead and really put the heat on and just make kind of an unusual play and just go ahead and overpot the turn. Just really try and put the heat on a hand like 9s or 10s. And I no longer think he has 9s or 10s now. I actually think he's going to have something at least as good as ace queen, probably queen jack. But now that basically it looks like the deck bailed me out completely. So because I don't think I would bet the river after he called a big overbet. But I do think he's going to have a hand that's going to have a tough time folding, because I think he's going to be pretty strong. So I'm going to go ahead and make a strong bet on the river. For the same reason I wasn't going to bluff the river is the same reason I should go for big value on the river, because my read was that he wasn't going to fold very often. But that logic doesn't make perfect sense, because the board did change and the flush draw came in. But even still, yeah, and he did go ahead and pay off the big bet. Again, so I think my read was spot on there, basically, that he wasn't going to fold the river after calling that big turn bet almost no matter what came, and he didn't. And it's important to go for the big value and not sort of switch your logic. Sometimes people are like, oh man, he called the big, turn bet. I'm never going to get him to fold on the river. And then they make their flush, and then they're like, oh man, I sure want to get paid. Maybe I'll just bet half pot now. And the logic sort of, goes all over the place. And, this has just got to be a fold here. And so it's really important to not let any emotions get involved there. I'd kind of made my decision, and that he just kind of wasn't going to fold, and made sure to get paid off there. I mean, a case could have even been made to shove the river and go a little bigger, but a shove is going to definitely introduce a little more psychology into the whole situation, where he goes, wow, why is he shoving? Whereas, a pot bet, I think, looks a little more like he's just going to kind of look at it as any other type of bet. So, I think the pot play, or the shove play, was a little more risky, but it's still, I wouldn't have faulted anybody in my shoes for just shoving there too, kind of operating under that logic I just provided. In the king jack suited, I'm going to go ahead and re-raise here. People are calling 3-bets with a pretty wide range of hands these days, and I think my hand has plenty of playability to it, and I can even get worse hands to call. And then also, it's just nice to take down the pot like I did. I mean, I pick up 4.5 blinds, basically, or 4 blinds other than what I put in. And that's just a great result. So this is, kind of a smallish raise, and this is borderline. I mean, I'm getting 2-1, and I'm in position, and I do think I'm going to go ahead and call here, but it's a little loose. So, kind of like that king-queen hand from, 20 minutes ago, this board hits my range a lot, where I might be calling the suited connectors and that type of deal, more than him, who is going to have 2 overcards a lot. And he checked very quickly, and I'm not going to have the best hand too often there. I mean, I'll have the best hand sometimes, but, like I'm beating king, queen, and stuff like that. But I don't want to like try and just keep checking it down and show it down, because then I give him I make myself look weak, as he made himself look weak to me, and then he might just kind of bet his king queen, and then I fold the best hand. So sometimes kind of the first guy to get in there and make the play is the one rewarded. And so I think it's just pretty much a complete no-brainer to bet that flop. And here's a hand where a lot of amateurs are going to really find it painful to make this kind of fold, and most of them just won't. I am going to fold here. I do believe that when he makes this squeeze against, when he makes that big raise against someone who raised into the entire field and got a caller, that he's going to have more hands that are just as good or better than mine than he is bluffs. And I just think I have too much of a pre-flop disadvantage to overcome post-flop and use my position. 7-9 suited, I guess we'll just go ahead and flat here. Could make a re-raise sometimes. In the 3s, in the 2s here, they're really tough boards to make plays against your opponent, because you never have any equity. It's not like you flop, like with queen jack of spades, sure, you don't flop as strong when you flop well, but at least you make draws a lot and you can kind of play them aggressively. And just miserable flops that hit my opponent's range very well on both boards, and I can't really make a case for doing anything other than folding both of them. And truth be told, I am folding before the flop, usually, to those re-raises that were just made by both of my opponents there. I just think you just have to check and fold so much on the flop, and you just don't hit sets often enough, just one time in 8. So I don't really see it being a source of profit there. But again, just for video purposes, I just said I was going to get involved in any pot where I could make some case to do it, and so that's why I made the calls there. Here I got a problem where I look like I have the best hand so much, but it's going to be really hard to get paid here. And the flush did come in. He shouldn't really have a flush too often, but he's going to think maybe I semi-bluffed with a flush, and I don't know. I'm just going to check, and I'm going to win most of the time. But I think that he's just paying off so infrequently that if we had history there, it could be a very easy bet on the river with some history. But with no history against opponent, I don't know if he's prone to slow play something like pot, you know, like a full house there, or maybe you've just taken a check call line on the turn with, you know, like an ace high flush draw, or yeah, I just don't know him well enough, and I just think he's going to fold almost every time when I bet on the river, except when he has me beat. So, you know, I wouldn't fault anyone for betting there though. It's just I pretty much just made that check simply because I don't know my opponent very well. I'm going to fold the ace jack here just because, again, he's raising into a lot of opponents and he's going to have a bigger ace a lot. So he calls the raise and the re-raise, and his range usually here is going to be a hand like ace queen and pocket pairs. And so I don't really have to worry about the flush draw too much, and I don't mind kind of just checking here because I just don't see him having a hand that's going to just call down all three streets, even if he has a hand as strong as queens. Obviously, I'd chop at the ace-king if he somehow played ace-king that way, so I don't get value from that. I don't think he's going to call with king-queen. And I don't think he's going to turn his hand into a bluff if he has a hand like tens or queens here and check raise me. So I'd rather bet the flop or check the flop, look a little weak, and then just start going for value. And hopefully he thinks I'm bluffing. But we're just playing his range there. The standard play, you'd think you flop top pair in a pot, you want to protect your hand, you want to get value from your hand, just start betting. But there isn't really much to protect against. You know, you see like a coordinated flush draw board there, and you go, okay, well, you should want to protect, right? Well, he doesn't really have queen 10 that could, you know, turn a straight, or a flush draw that could turn a flush. He doesn't have those hands. He has pairs and, you know, maybe like an ace queen suited, so I guess he could have ace queen of clubs, but that's only one hand, one possible hand. So I'm not going to worry about just one, like specifically somebody having ace queen of clubs. I'm going to maximize against my opponent's range, and you know, he's not going to hit his two cards in the deck very often by giving him a free card, just around 5% of the time, so, or less. So I'd rather just try and look a little weak, and then maybe look like I just started bluffing on the turn river, and hopefully he just kind of calls me down with a hand like tens. But it's just kind of a bad board to get any money at all from my opponent against the types of hands he would call that re-raise with. You know, like nines and queens. Probably not even queens. Probably tens, nines. You know, a lower pocket pair. And then to sort of also make a point for my check there is that he can definitely have pocket jacks. Pocket jacks is definitely the type of hand that would not want to re-raise me there before the flop, but would also not really want to fold before the flop. And so I save a lot of money against those jacks by checking. You know, he'll probably just bet the turn and I'll call, and he'll bet the river and I'll call. And I will lose much less. So I definitely like my check there. Now that assumes, of course, that you're playing against an opponent who would only call with those types of hands I mentioned. A lot of opponents are just going to call with all kinds of hands there. And if you're against someone who does that, then by all means, just start betting and trying to make money off of them. Because you're going to have the best hand almost always, and he could maybe have a hand like king 10 and keep paying you off, or he could have a hand even like queen 10 suited and you don't want to give a free card to an open-ended draw. But I mean, you guys have seen the video so far. I'm sure he didn't strike you as an overly loose player, so I have to assume that he's going to have a strong but not monster type of hand when he calls there. So maybe kind of a theme of all this video so far is basically that, we're playing our opponent's likely holding. So when we raised on table 2, when we just had that queen jack, and he made that lead on the 8-4 deuce flop, and then I called the flop and raised him on the turn, we're ignoring our cards and playing the likely hands that my opponent has and trying to play them appropriately. Here we made kind of an odd check with ace-king because we were playing the hands that our opponent likely would have more so than we were sort of just looking at the strength of our hand. So it's generally in poker, you want to spend most of your time thinking about what your opponent has more so than staring at your own cards. And and then to take it a step further, you want to think what your opponent thinks you might have. And obviously, it's just a complex game, which is why I'm sure you're all here to watch this and learn a little more about it. But I think a good place to start is to just start to think about what your opponent has and what he might do with the hand that he could have, and go from there. So while this, session hasn't been loaded with big action-filled pots, I do think we've had a good amount to discuss. And one thing to think about, when I was really kind of, starting to play poker and starting to know enough to where I could play it for a living, I oftentimes just, I focused a lot on what I had and what should I do with, a top pair, top kicker type hand, or all that type of stuff. And, then as my game evolved, it went to, what do I think my opponent has, and then what do I think my opponent thinks that I have, and what's been going on recently at the table. What kind of image have I created? There's just so many things. This is such a psychological game. It's also a math game. We're making a lot of these plays we've made so far based on the odds of our opponents having certain types of hands. But I've always kind of called poker, maybe the ultimate marriage of math and psychology. And that's, I love math and I love psychology. So I guess it makes sense that I've played this game decently well over the years. But, focusing a lot on those two things are gonna kind of be your friend in the process of you trying to become better and better at poker. So he made the re-raise a little bigger this time before the flop. I still had to call because I had excellent odds and a very playable hand. And then he made this bet a little bigger too. I don't think I can fold right away, but I'm probably gonna have to toss this if he makes it like $10 or something, or maybe, yeah, close to $10. He just kind of looks like he's gonna have it a little more at this point. It's kind of a big fold, but because I'm pretty much giving him credit for like a ace-jack type of hand or queens, kings, and aces. He could also have a hand like ace-king of clubs, ace-queen of clubs is just going to bet and call off. But I'm going to go ahead and fold there because I just kind of do believe he's given a little away with the sizing of his bets there. he went a little smaller when he didn't have it, and now he looks a little more excited. And so, like, we know he didn't have it when he made the smaller bet. So when he made the bigger bet, what are we to assume? You know, maybe I'm assuming incorrectly, but it's a big sort of, you know, there isn't really a lot of information for me to confidently say that he's betting big hands big and small hands small, but that is kind of a tendency of a lot of players in general, and so I'm going to kind of stick to that read and make that fold there. I could bluff the 6 here. Not super excited about it though. Yeah, I think I'm just going to give it to him. Oh, okay. Don't ask me how that happened. I guess like 3-4 or something. And I start off by calling with the A6 of diamonds here. I do think I could be in a little bit of trouble though. He re-raised out, or he bet out, which looks like 7s and 8s a lot. But also keep in mind, like a 4 of hearts could come, or a 2 of hearts could come, and then he checks. And then I think he might have 7s or 8s. So then I go ahead and then I'm going to fold the ace 9 of diamonds here. And then I go ahead and just bluff him off of that hand. But now I picked up the flush draw, and also an interesting card came. If he does check here, I think I'm going to have to bet. And he bet again. So this is this is tough, because I know our hand looks like total junk, but he should not be wanting to make a bet this large with just like a pocket 5s type of hand. This could be a busted flush draw a lot. God, I just don't have enough time. I am going to fold here. I'd like to think it through a little more. And generally, I default to just making the fold there if my time bank's low and I don't have a lot of time to think about it. You know, it's kind of a tough decision there. It's a half of a stack bet, and I need to, if I'm going to make a call like that, I need to have thought about it pretty well. And he's betting into me there when I can definitely have a 7 too. That's exactly how I would have played pocket 7s. We'll re-raise 7-8 suited. So, you know, I just don't see him going that big with a set, but he might. And if he is, then my call is going to probably be pretty bad. And if he's kind of checking and calling, which I think is by far his best play, and try and pick off some flush draws of mine that missed with a set, like just a check call a set on the river. Like I guess what I'm saying is, if you're only leading out with a 7 there, I might have a call there. If he's leading out with all his sets too, then that's trouble for me. And I just definitely should be folding. But, you know, that might be how he plays pocket 7s every time too. And there is the 7-8 that made the nuts on the turn. But there are the queen jacks of hearts, you know, that would, I'm sure, make that big bet on the river because it's their only chance to win. So, you know, it's going to be a little close there on what to do. And here I'm going to have the best hand almost always. Ace is up. And I just went ahead and bet and hope to, you know, just keep betting and keep getting paid. But looks like he might add a hand like, you know, just a king. Decided to get rid of it. Getting towards the end of the video here, what the hell, we'll go ahead and re-raise ace-5 suited and just kind of do something. I'll play one more orbit around every table, except the top left. I'll just play all the free hands. So, nothing exciting there. You know, calling is an option there. Folding's probably the play. re-raising might be better than calling, just because I'll get a lot of folds like I just did, and I'll also get a lot of like calls from pocket nines that, you know, then the flop's like king queen three, and he checks and I bet and he folds. So and then obviously I can just flop huge and win a big pot. You know, maybe he just calls with ace queen, the flop's, you know, ace 5-8 or something, and win a monster pot. So oops. All right, so an overcard, backdoor straight, backdoor flush. I'll just go ahead and start by betting here at the a7. Just try and take it down, hopefully. And we turn a flush draw, so we're going to continue to bet. I'm going to try and make it a little bigger, hopefully get him to fold a 10 if he has one. He's not folding a king. And then if we don't improve, we'll, you know, maybe bet like a 9 on the river or something. Something that like fills in the queen jack I could be bluffing with. But, you know, I think at this point he's going to have a hand like, I mean, what are the hands he could have? He could have something like a jack 10 of hearts, 10-9 of hearts, which I could probably get to fold. But also just a bunch of kings. I just don't see him laying down a king on this board. I just don't. If he could fold a king, I would bet here, but we're going to check and see what he has. Queen 10. Okay, so that's probably about the worst hand he would ever have there. That would call the turn as well. Yeah, I mean, I don't really see him. That's what they'd call, you know, in the range of hands that he could have. That would be what they'd call the bottom end of the range of hands he could have on the turn. So, you know, even though I saw that type of hand, I wish I'd bet, because I do think he's folding plenty often enough on the river to make a bet good with that particular hand. That because that's the bottom end of his range, so to speak, that I can't always assume, obviously, he's going to have the bottom end of his range. So I think overall, against all the hands he could have, checking was probably best. I mean, I could, you know, it is no limit hold'em, so you always want to think about all your options. I certainly could have considered like overbetting the river and really made him, you know, think, even with just a king, especially if it wasn't a good king. So, you know, there are options there. I think, you know, just in sort of the default strategy you'll have, I think I played that hand about the way 99% of pros would play it as their default strategy there. But you have options. And, you know, I mean, what if I just shove there? He might just fold every hand he has every time. We don't know that. In which case, obviously, a shove would be an amazingly good play. So, you know, you always want to think about every action you can take in poker. And I didn't discuss that one before I made it, but anyway, enough about that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys are getting something out of this. You know, feel free to give some feedback, and I hope this helps you out, and I hope to see you at the tables, and I don't mean that sarcastically, meaning I'm trying to take your money, but I just hope to see you guys around, and hope you're enjoying the video, and good luck.